I'm speaking again with Dr. Joseph Daher. He is Swiss Syrian. He hosts the blog Syria Freedom Forever. He's expanding on his PhD for a book on the Lebanese movement Hezbollah. He is currently teaching in Lausanne, and he's speaking to us from Geneva, Switzerland. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation.
Most urgent thing that I see in Syria is this siege at Madaya. There's an article in the website vice.com, which has some really terrible pictures. Tell us about Madaya.
So Madaya has been besieged by the Syrian army of the regime and its ally Hezbollah for a few months, some say even 6 months now. Around few tens of thousands of civilians have been besieged by these two actors, and people have been dying slowly in this city. Unfortunately, this is just one example. Madaya is just one example of what happened in other cities also of Syria or neighborhoods, as we remember, and still on many aspects, Yarmouk refugee camp, other neighborhoods throughout Syria. So again, it's a new crime of the Assad regime, without forgetting that Madaya had suffered from chemical attacks a couple of weeks ago. And it's showing that no readiness at all is shown on the Assad regime towards any kind of transition for a peace, or even the establishment of a kind of confidence between opposition groups and the Assad regime. The Assad regime is continuing its war against the Syrian people, and Madaya...
I want to stop you for 1 second. You say chemical attacks. I mean, I think that'll be a big surprise to people. People remember after the chemical attacks at Al-Ghouta, there was a big crisis, and then the Syrians said they would get rid of their chemicals. Or that's what I understood. What is the story about that?
So it was a report made a couple of weeks ago by various popular organizations from the city of Madaya, showing that chemical attacks were made on dozens of people. So not on the same level than in Ghouta. We had hundreds of people suffering from the chemical attacks, and a lot died of it. In Madaya, it was dozens of people, but it was really well reported by various, as I told you, popular organizations, doctors on the ground, yeah, so it's not a new surprise, even though the Assad regime promised to surrender its chemical weapons to Russia, I think was the deal. It didn't completely surrender all its chemical weaponry.
Mm-hmm. Let me go back a step. Exactly where is this town, Madaya?
So the town of Madaya is situated close to Damascus. It's in the governorate of Rif Dimashq, northwest. Yeah,
so I mean, the pictures I saw, just there was one. It was a picture of, well, the article was called "In Madaya, the children are eating leaf soup," and it showed a picture of this green mess in a pot. Unbelievable. I mean, other places said they're eating cats or anything. It's down to that level.
Yes, indeed, we've witnessed a lot. Unfortunately, pictures on Facebook or on social media showing the children dead or adults dead because of the regime's policy of starving the inhabitants of Madaya, which again is not new, and it's just another crimes on the long list of the Assad regime.
There was a banner from Kafar Anbel. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but they said, well, just kill the adults, please leave the kids alone. I mean, that was pretty amazing.
You had a couple of messages of solidarity from throughout regions of Syria with Madaya. For example, the Yarmouk refugee camp that also witnessed a siege on it and still on many aspects suffering from it. There was pictures, message of solidarity sent by the inhabitants of Yarmouk refugee camp that, for example, Palestinian and Syrians are one, the siege is one, our enemy is one. There was also from a small city called Talbisa in north of Syria that showed solidarity with Madaya camp. Banners also were raised by democratic activists in Deir Zor. So you had a couple of campaigns of solidarity, and of course everyone knows what is happening in Madaya, so the regime cannot, and its ally Hezbollah, that is the most complicit in the siege of the city, cannot hide it.
And then there's also some sieges of Assad friendly towns, is that right? There's two that I've read about. I can't remember their names.
Yes, it's Qufr and Fuara in north, I think, east of Aleppo. It's two Shia villages that just witnessed actually an exchange of, it was part of different exchange of soldiers and civilians between various opposition groups and the Assad regime. And these two cities have indeed suffered from different bombing and from notably Ahrar al-Sham and Jabhat al-Nusra groups because they're considered as Shia as being part of the opposition, which some of this part of the city are indeed, but we should nevertheless refuse this kind of behavior, not to act just like the regime, even though it's people want to take revenge of all the acts of the crimes of the regime, but I personally don't support it. For example, just lately, following the bombing of Idlib by Russian warplanes, this actually put an end to the truce that you had between the regime and opposition groups in this town. And because the Russian airplanes broke this truce, Ahrar al-Sham, Jabhat al-Nusra started again to bomb these two Shia small cities. So this era of complete war, of crushing any kind of possibility of peace, is all the time made by the regime and its allies.
Now, where is the UN in all this? I mean, I came across yesterday a resolution that was passed almost a year ago where they demanded certain things be stopped, including barrel bombs. Did it talk about the sieges too?
I mean, it should be included if we understand it, I mean, intelligently, that any kind of attacks or, I mean, even siege should be stopped. If we want to have a possibility to reaching towards a form of peace or towards a form of ceasefires in various regions, etc. But until today, it's the exact opposite that we've witnessed in Syria. The regime is continuing, as I told you before, through various ways, its war against the Syrian people, with the help of its allies, directly or indirectly.
And of course, the barrel bombs have not stopped.
No, not at all.
What about an idea that we call on the UN to parachute food into all these places that are under siege?
I mean, the problem is that you might, the Assad warplanes or the Russian warplanes might refuse it, if not bomb it as a violation of the airspace of the Syrian regime. They would use this excuse. But what we have to see, it's the break of this siege, and hopefully people getting food necessities or whatever they need, also water, first necessary food and water elements.
Well, you know, I raise that because I'm trying to think about what the peace movement in the United States could raise. I mean, you know, at times you hear no-fly zone and this and that. I don't think the peace movement is going to support anything military. But if you said, why doesn't the UN parachute food? You know, whenever there's a crisis, an earthquake or whatever, there's always these, planes, even military, sending in food. It might be interesting to contemplate this idea that the UN should get some planes and send in food.
The issue is that we never have to forget that the UN Security Council is controlled by the main superpowers, the five big superpowers, including Russia and the US. So you will not have any kind of for example, these kind of actions in Syria with the agreement of one or the powers. This would be, in this case, Russia. Regarding the peace movement, first of all, what should be made very clear is support to the Syrian popular movement against dictatorship, which has not been the case from various peace movements around the world, which have stopped on the slogan "No to foreign interventions" or "The main enemy is at home," saying that we oppose only our own country or bourgeoisie state. And understanding actually very badly what were the objectives of their own states or bourgeoisie regarding Syria. And on the opposite, you've seen many people going more clearly in favor of the Assad regime, being on the different panels of Stop the Wars movement or peace movement. So this is unfortunate. So solidarity with the struggle of the Syrian people, and no to all foreign intervention, including Russia and Iran today.
Mm-hmm.
And Hezbollah,
yeah.
sorry.
Unfortunately, you see people even bringing up the Al Ghouta chemical attack, and again, these endless looking at details and saying that, well, Seymour Hersh proved that the regime didn't do the chemical attack. It's awful.
It's awful, and it's a shame. It's a shame, and it's I can't even start my not only my opposition, my disgust towards this kind of propaganda that is not very different from a brutal dictatorship of the Assad regime. So it's and plus there's been many reports showing that it was the Assad regime that made this crime.
Now I want to move off a little bit. When you use the word disgust, I made a meme not about Syria but about Saudi Arabia, a picture of Obama and King Salman. And I know you've written about Saudi Arabia, and I see a number of people have shared something I think you wrote last year or a year before. And we just saw a execution of a Shia leader, but he wasn't a sectarian, evidently, because even on our national public radio, they noted that he opposed what Assad was doing in Syria.
Yes, indeed. His name is Sheikh Numar. He was one of the leaders of the popular movement in various eastern region of Saudi Arabia that is mostly populated by Shia citizens of Saudi Arabia that suffer from various discriminations, whether political, social, economical, religious, obviously, as well. And he had indeed his discourse was towards democracy, equality, and no to sectarianism in Saudi Arabia, and he was refusing as well the use of violence, even though the security services of Saudi Arabia, since the first day of protests in Qatif region, Awamiya, used terrible violence against protesters and civilians, just as other authoritarian regimes in the region. In addition to this, he was against any kind of sectarian talk or defending any kind of authoritarian regime when it came to the Assad dictatorship or Saudi Arabia. So this was very interesting indeed to see this personality, Sheikh Nimr.
Now, it is so important, I think we both agree, that we don't let all these conflicts become sectarian, and the media tries to do that all the time, and tries to, especially in the case of Syria, claim that it's just Sunni versus Shia and so on. Now, you had a piece about one of the groups, Arar al-Sham, if I'm saying that right, And I apologize because somehow my Google translator is acting up, and it had the English, but it was a very strange kind of English. So what kind of points were you making in that article?
I think it was not an article. It was a short explanation, like sheet or very short article showing. I think it was the pictures of a campaign that was started by Jabhat al-Nusra and Ahrar al-Sham in various regions of Idlib and Rif Idlib and Rif Halab against the Riyadh Conference that happened in December, and against any kind of what we used to call a kind of perspective of democracy. Democracy is understood as something from the West. You had, for example, slogans as saying democracy is the religion of the West, or saying that democracy is something is apostasy in an Islamic understanding of the religion. Their understanding of the religion, it's unacceptable, religious speaking, in their understanding. So there was a hard campaign against any kind of democracy perspectives, and the Riyadh Conference. This was made hand in hand. For example, following the Riyadh Conference in Saudi Arabia in December, that united large sections of the opposition of Syria, and they imposed kind of a united, one unique speech in various mosques of Idlib, that's saying this was a conspiracy, that all the actors of participating in the Riyadh Conference were friends of the Assad regime and they were against Islam.
Wow. And then the people who are saying this, ISIS people know, but Nusra basically is Al-Qaeda, is that right?
Yes, he has been linked. This group has been linked since 2012 to Al-Qaeda.
And Ahrar al-Sham, if you could tell us a bit about them.
This is a Salafist jihadist organization that is based nationally in Syria, which is not something new for any kind of Salafist jihadist experiences. You had this in Chechnya against the struggle of the Russian occupation and Russian, authoritarianism against the Chechnya people. You had groups that were Salafist jihadists, but in a national framework. And this is actually what you have with Ahrar al-Sham. It's a Salafist jihadist organization in a national framework that is Syria, based with Syrian people at 100%, and it's calling for an Islamic State. And one of the reasons why finally Ahrar al-Sham, they were invited to Riyadh Conference, and one of their spokespersons participated in it, but finally they refused to sign the issue for various reasons, but including the fact that it wasn't written clearly that the identity of the future Syrian state should be Arabic and Islamic, which is very exclusive for not only minorities, whether religious sects or ethnicities, but not all Sunnis or Arab Sunnis feel that they need to identify with their ethnicity or the religion. So it's an exclusive perspective of a future Syria. And Ahrar al-Sham has allied with Jabhat al-Nusra for a couple of long time, within the Conquest Army, which is a coalition of led by Jabhat al-Nusra and Ahrar al-Sham, and other smallest Free Syrian Army factions. And they're mostly situated in northeastern Syria, and they've been receiving support from especially Qatar and Turkey.
If I could ask you a little more about that conference in Riyadh. Riyadh is Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
And it seems very surprising that the Saudis would be sponsoring a conference that was of the more democratic and secular people in Syria. Is that what happened?
You had various groups in Riyadh Conference, and that mostly were most of the people that participated in it were the Etilaf, which is the coalition, which is composed of various groups, the Muslim Brotherhoods, some also Salafist-leaning groups, but you had liberals as well in it, you had Democrats in it, various social democrats political parties, you had the National Coordination Body, which is composed mostly of ex-Stalinist and Arab nationalist groups. And you had various individuals that have that consider themselves having a weight on the Syrian political scene, like Michel Kilo and others. You had also groups that are quite on the opposition, but quite close to the Assad regime, like the Tayyar al-Bina, which is like rebuilding the state, led by Louis Hussein, who is considered quite close to the regime. So yeah, you had very different people joining it, and in addition, what I said before, you had various armed groups, FSA forces, but as well Army of Islam, which the late Zahran al-Lush, who's been assassinated in a Russian bombing a couple of weeks ago, was the leader of Islam Army, and Ahrar al-Sham was invited. So you had from Salafist jihadist groups to liberals and even social democrat political parties. So it was various, very diverse, but the final statement, and this is why it pushed the Islamic, the Jaish al-Islam, Islam Army, and Ahrar al-Sham to withdraw, was not to withdraw because the identity of the state, Islamic and Arab, was not put in it. It was said that it would be a state for all of Syrian people, citizens, etc. Out of it came a negotiation team led by Riyadh Hijab, who was the ex-prime minister of Syria in 2012, that defected. That is led by him, but even he said now that this negotiation team cannot negotiate with a regime that is continuing its war against the people of Syria. Because first step before negotiation should be the end of military attacks on opposition neighborhoods, villages, cities, bombing, barrel bombs, etc. This has not been done by the Assad army.
I wanted to ask you, as we get to the end of the interview, about that assassination you mentioned, the leader of the Army of Islam.
Yes.
I mean, I saw some people, very, very sympathetic to him, but when I think of him, I think of the kidnapping that was ascribed to him, the Duma 4, I think they call it, Razan Zaituna. He did not seem to be any kind of friend of democracy to me.
There's two things to this story. First of all, whether or not, let me put it this way. When Russia bombs Syria, we have to refuse it and condemn it as a principle. Whether in Ghouta, whether in Aleppo, etc. This is the first thing we should do. And including when it bombs people like Jabhat al-Nusra or even Zahran al-Lush, that we disagree politically, we should condemn this, because this is a foreign military intervention, not to put an end to reactionary groups in Syria, but to stabilize and assist the Assad regime in its war against the Syrian people. This is the first thing. The second thing, it doesn't mean that you condemn Russian bombing, that you sympathize politically with the political ideas of people like Jabhat al-Nusra or Zahran al-Lush. And the reactionary character of Zahran al-Lush, no one can deny it. But I'm still not satisfied, and I oppose it's an assassination by Russian bombing. It would have been far better that he's been overthrown by the Syrian people themselves in Ghouta, because you had frequent demonstrations in Ghouta from from the spouses, from political prisoners. You had a lot of activities by media activists, democratic activists going on in Ghouta despite everything. And El Ghouta are still suffering because he was not the only one to die in it. In the various bombings from all the Assad regime or the Russian bombing of the Ghouta that has been suffering constantly for the past, I mean, even few years from the Assad regime, and now for the past few months of Russian bombing. You hear very often bombing of Russian airplanes on market in Duma, in various areas of Ghouta. So there's two different things to the story. Obviously, Zahran al-Ush, even though he had commentaries toward Western press that he was for democracy in the past year because under the pressure, because he was the man of Saudi Arabia in Syria. He was the group that received the most funds from Saudi Arabia, private networks from Saudi Arabia for the past few years. His reactionary character is clear, but in no way it excuses, or I will never be happy for its assassination by Russian bombing or Assad regime. I condemn it on the opposite.
Well, thank you very much for this interview. We went over a whole lot of things.
Thank you to you and your support for the Syrian revolution.
And thank you all, the viewers, for watching this presentation. This is Stanley Heller for The Struggle.